Thank you everybody for joining us on a summer Sunday instead of being in the pool or doing something else fun, either in Israel or here in the States or wherever you are. But we're excited to see so many people register. So we'll try to stay on time, and maybe we'll give a couple more minutes for everybody to join before we start. So Hadas, in the meantime, as people are joining us, what's the name of the kibbutz again?
Bachan, where I live right now?
Yeah, you know that
Bachan.
I'm from Netanya,
Oh, we're very close.
but somehow, I mean, it has to be a small kibbutz because I'm not very familiar with it.
It's like close to Tulkarem.
Oh, how is that? The people can, that's interesting. People can text us. It's the first time
I
that I
live in
see it.
California. People are from all over the place. This is amazing.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I mean, I think that we're probably you and my mother and my hometown is just 10 minutes away. How big is the kibbutz? How many people live there?
I don't know. I think like 1,000 people. I don't know if it's 1,000 people. A thousand. No, I think it's just 1,000 people, not 1,000 families. Maybe 400 families or something. 300 families, 400. I'm not sure.
And are there a lot of Americans, or you're one of the only Americans?
Um, I think there is a group. There are some Americans, there are some British people here, mostly Israelis though.
Okay, so I think we're
You know what? I'm getting a request for can you send me the viewing link? Or did you just send that to me?
the viewing link is
The-
I mean, it's just through the register. I'm surprised I see that there's an option to chat here. Usually the chat is on Q&A, but something with the setting. So anybody can view while they register. It's just there's no direct. You have to register first, and
The
then
only
it's
link I have is the panelist link.
so that's something else. The other link is just a regular Zoom registration, and then it's basically linking you directly to the Zoom itself. Okay,
Can you
so
send that to me? I'm getting the request from my husband wants to join and he
yes, of course. Let me see what's that. Give me 1 second. I'm almost there. Okay, I'm sending it to you also on WhatsApp
Okay.
and also here. Panelists. Okay. So, hello everybody. My name is Yair, and it's a perfect time to start 101 or 801, depending on where you are, or 1101. I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. And my name is Yair, and before I introduce Abby, just to tell you a few words about what we're doing here. This webinar, this Zoom webinar, which I think will be very interesting because many of you know Hadas, but there's many layers of this conversation, including United States, why she moved to Israel, the work that she's doing here. So I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation that is going to be relevant to many of us or all of us. I also wanted to thank all of the organizations that are supporting and participating in planning this important event. And there's many organizations, StandWithUs, the Federation, JCRC, ADL, and others. Just a couple, AID Coalition, a couple of organizations that I personally feel connected to is the American Jewish, the AJMA, the American Jewish Medical Association, which is really the Jewish umbrella organization of all the Jewish healthcare providers that are part of the fighting the anti-Semitism wherever it is in healthcare. And then the second one is Hope for Israel Alliance, which is an organization that its mission is really three different things: to bring the hostages back as soon as possible, right now, and to fight anti-Semitism wherever it is, K to 12, campuses, healthcare, etc., and to support Israel as a democratic nation. So with that, thank you everybody for joining, and I'm going to introduce Abby. So Abigail, or Abby Rubin, many of you in the area of Greater Philadelphia know her, but she is a mother of 4 children from Bala Cynwyd. In terms of her profession, she's an occupational therapist, but currently, because of activism way before October 7th related to multiple issues, including in school, she is serving as the director of Lower Merion School Board, which is one of the biggest suburbs around Philadelphia. But also, she is a very active person in many ways in the Jewish community. She's very passionate about child development, lifelong learning, and that's why she kind of became known here. And she's also been following what Hadas has been doing. So it's a pleasure. It's my pleasure to introduce Abigail Lerner. Ruben, thank you very much for joining us as a co-moderator.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And thank you, Hadas. So should we get right into it?
Sure.
Okay. So, hello. I personally, I'm very thrilled to be speaking with you because I have been following you kind of in a professional, context. And I think you're doing incredible work. But on a personal level, I'd love to know how you're doing and how this past year has been since you've moved to Israel and how you're doing, how it's been.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This year has been wild and crazy and difficult and amazing. And it's been incredible to watch, mostly to watch my children grow and learn Hebrew. We moved here last summer. So we've been here for a year now. And um, which means that the kids have been in school for, a full school year. And it's incredible to see them just pick up the language and the culture. For my oldest, this is like starting the bar mitzvah season here in Israel. But it's been an introduction to Israeli bureaucracy. There's a lot of things that I had to get done because even though I've lived in Israel before, I haven't this is a different time of my life. I was born in Israel. My parents moved away from Israel when I was less than 2, and then I came back from the ages of 18 to 20 when I was in the army as a chayelet bodeda. So my parents were not with me, and then I went back to the States and started my career and lived there for a very long time, and decided that we needed to come back, and I'm sure we'll get into that. We initially had planned on being here for 1 year after my career change, and we've extended that to 2 years now. That's the plan. We do plan on coming back, so we didn't really officially make Aliyah, but it doesn't mean that I haven't gone through bureaucracy. So I've had to get, my Taudat Zehut and all kinds of things, and it's very Israeli. It's a very Israeli experience going to the place that you need to go to, and then, they take a lunch break, and then they're like, come back tomorrow, but then tomorrow, the hours are different, and then you go the following day, and they're closed that following day. So it's very Israeli. There's a lot of, even though I'm an Israeli, now that I'm like living here and working here and as an adult, there's a lot of really interesting kind of culture shocky things, minor, but also being here at a time of war, not just one war, but a bonus 2 wars. Um, I feel like we're really giving our kids the authentic Israel experience.
Thank you for that introduction. So, a lot of people, some of the people here in Philadelphia know you. When we decided to create this session, it's not really about only Philadelphia, because I think that your story may be more familiar to the Philadelphia people, but it's really, I think, is important for many aspects for pretty much all the Jews and allies in the country and the world. So, but maybe for some context for those people who don't know you. I know that you've been a pretty famous radio reporter, journalist, reporter in the radio, in a major radio station here, pretty much from the beginning of 2000, so over 20 years or so. Maybe you can tell us just a little bit about your job, what you did. And now, this is very, very important, and I make this sometimes this notice before we have different topic discussions. We're going to talk here only about what makes you comfortable with us. If there's any issues that are pertaining related to your previous job that for whatever reasons, legal, personal, anything you prefer to stay out, then, obviously we're going to stay out with it, but you don't have to hesitate. Just tell us, I can talk about this, but I'm not going to talk about this. But I do think that it's interesting and relevant to hear your story, because this is basically why, or one of the reasons that you moved into Israel. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your career as a reporter, as a journalist, and what has happened over the course of the last couple of years.
So I'll premise this by this. It's no secret. I just want to let people know that in my kind of exit contract, I am not allowed to disparage the station, but I am allowed to give a factual account of my experiences. I have no intention on disparaging the station. I worked for Philadelphia's all news radio station for 22 years. About 18 of those years were under one manager. Then we had another younger manager. And then the last couple of years, we had even younger managers that came in and, brought their own take to the station. Um, for most of my time, it was really like embraced. My background was embraced. Every time that we had a time there, anytime it was like a public facing event when we were talking to anybody, whether it was the news studies kids or anytime we had kind of public facing appearances, my manager of like 18, 19 years, the first manager, he would always say, "Oh, this is Hadas Kuznits. She's an Israeli American, served in the IDF." You know, it was like encouraged. I mean, look, my journalism, like I've been very. I would like to think I take very much pride in the fact that even though that is my background, when you're a journalist, it doesn't really matter what your background is. You have to tell the story from both sides or from all sides. You have to give the full picture of the story. But it is nice to be in a diverse newsroom. And I'm not just talking diversity when it comes to like I'm talking diversity when it comes to how people look. I'm talking about diversity in terms of thought, in terms of background, in terms of age, gender. That is really important for a newsroom to have diversity. And my background really did bring diversity to the newsroom because you want the newsroom to reflect the population of your city. And our city has the second largest Jewish population behind New York. And it's a very important part of our listenership. I know that a lot of people had told me that it was when they would hear my name on the radio, it meant a lot to them because they recognized my name as an Israeli name. Um, that's also something that I was told, that became a detriment later on in my career at this particular workplace because of things that they had told me. Um, but yeah, I mean, I really got to know Philly very, very well. I do believe that Philly knew me very well. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to say goodbye at the end, but thank you to um, the Jewish exponent who did a beautiful piece on me when I left, and that was like an opportunity to say goodbye to Philadelphia. And then after that chapter in my life ended, we can get into it if you want to know when you want to ask about it. Then we decided to. I'd always wanted to move to Israel at least for 1 year. I've had conversations with my husband. Um, like, oh, what if we could just take a sabbatical or go to Israel? And I always wanted to go before the kids hit like bar mitzvah age because that's when you get language. And this actually turned out to be the perfect opportunity to take my severance and spend it in Israel.
Yeah, you're
Oh,
muted.
You're on mute.
You would expect that by now. I know how to unmute myself, but I think maybe we should not. There's going to be a lot of things to talk about. We want to hear about your YouTube experience and how you think it's going. Basically, it's going to help the Jewish voice wherever it is, and also the company, and generally other things that you are doing in Israel. But I do think that we should probably spend a few minutes to understand because I can tell you personally and working with a lot of people feel the anti-Semitism in subtle ways. And it's just a matter of fact. You get a cold shoulder here. People are not going to not continuing different projects with you. It's not necessarily the overt anti-Semitism that we saw here, literally in a rally, a hostage rally a couple of days ago, when a normal person came in, a woman came to speak with people of the community. What are you doing here? And she just suddenly declared that Zionism is a Satan or Satanism, and this kind of shocked the community. But we were seeing this more and more. And yet most of the anti-Semitism is kind of more subtle that we feel it. And So maybe, again, in a factual point, not to make any allegations or anything, you can describe what have you been experiencing and why you decided eventually to move on.
Well, I definitely feel like the sentiment against Jews and Israelis has changed over the past couple of decades. Um, like I said, when I first worked at the place where I worked, it was embraced, it was highlighted. It was kind of my background was a symbol of diversity. And then there were, subtle things that happened, arguments that are documented in Slack exchanges, questions that have come up. Um, I don't know how much I can really get into here. You can make your own decisions whether something is anti-Semitic or not anti-Semitic, but um, being told I can't cover a certain topic or side to a story because of my name or my background, um, I have to be careful here. Uh, just certain sentiments that I was told, like being told when it comes to stories that might have been approved easily earlier in my career. Later on, it became like, for example, stories about there was a story about the ADL did a report on the state of anti-Semitism, and there was a question that came up: who's defining anti-Semitism? Um, the ADL, IRA. I was told that I had to interview um, somebody from CARE or a random pro-Palestinian supporter to so that they could tell me what anti-Semitism is. And my response to that was that you would never ask anybody from any other ethnicity. You never not take their word for what is racism or sexism or like you'd never ask a guy like what's sexist. You'd never ask someone that's not black what's racist. But with Jews, and I mean, and this was never overtly said to me, but I was questioning that, and the response I got was a link to an op-ed talking about anti-Zionism versus anti-Semitism, which, for the record, I believe that op-ed was wrong. And anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. We can talk about that forever. I don't think this is the topic of the conversation, but I did feel that sentiments were shifting. Now, for the record, I do have to say that I don't want to like confuse anybody. Like I said, you decide yourself what you think. After the war, after the October 7th, there were a lot of discussions, conversations that a lot of uh, I guess apprehension on my part as to how we were following through on the coverage, and there was a lot of um, like challenging conversations of how the coverage was happening. I did get laid off for their reasoning was there was no reason that I was laid off. And that came after a very, very challenging year, personally, um, with some things that I had encountered and seen. I can't really go into it, but I did see, not just personally, but I saw, I'm a journalist that goes out into the community, and I saw this shift in Philadelphia. I saw this shift in the world. I saw people being questions about what they can and can't say. I saw, you know, just there was a question as to, like whose truth do you whose side, not whose side, but like what aspect do you listen to when it comes to news and opinion, and if you're putting things out there, and what gets questioned and what doesn't get questioned. I can't really go into it much further than that, but again, there was a lot that went, it really, things dramatically changed after October 7th. I think a lot of people in the world felt that way. And after I was laid off for no reason, I decided to come here. And it's really interesting because I now work for a company called CyberWell. And I've had conversations with my direct manager, who's the hiring manager, also hired me. And she, we're talking about, she's like, oh, you had an extensive background. And, we really were very impressed with all of your years in news and everything that you did. And I know you're, like she was saying basically that she met a lot of people who like came to Israel. It's an American company who came to Israel and had kind of negative experiences because they were Jewish, and that's how they ended up like being here. It's there's a lot of people that are. I'm seeing it not just here. I also worked at the Times of Israel in Israel, and I'm meeting a lot of people that are having this kind of universal experience of feeling like the world changed and turned against them after October 7th. And I talk about this a lot on my YouTube channel. I interview a lot of people that the same theme keeps coming up. The world changed since October 7th. Well, once you were like accepted into society, but by the way, separate, let's cut like the discussion about my previous work. Like this is other stuff for the record. Um, a lot of people are having this experience that they're afraid to be Jewish, they're afraid to speak Hebrew. I was literally just having a conversation with one of my son's parents at his birthday party. We're talking about going on vacation, and she said that she's afraid to leave Israel because her kids don't have any other languages that they speak. So she's afraid to kind of speak Hebrew publicly outside, which I also like after the 7th, I remember talking to somebody, one of the parents from the Tzofim. My kids go to the Tzofim, and they were saying, let's switch to English because you don't know who's listening or which is such a sad, sad sentiment. And I also can relate to it, unfortunately.
I have a question. I have a few questions, and I've been holding on to all of them. But one of my questions, based on what you were just describing, is you're describing what many people experience as a pretty hostile sort of environment. And I'm curious how you stay empowered and how you pivot, because you are a pretty resilient person who has recreated in some way a new life in Israel, even though it's like an iteration of your existing life. How did you do that? And how do you stay kind of hopeful and empowered when you're in the midst of this, really difficult time?
Look, anybody who gets laid off from a job of, decades, it's going to hit you no matter what the reason is. For me, this was an opportunity, and now more than ever, I think a lot of people can relate to this, that after the war and after a lot of the things that we're feeling on the outside, I wanted to raise Zionist kids who understand what it means, what the word Zionism means, what Judaism means, that know how to speak Hebrew. And so for me, it was an opportunity to do my sabbatical year that I wanted to do. And I have to, give credit to my husband, who none of this would be possible without his support. Because when I said, when I said like I have this dream that my kids will have like at least a year so they have a connection in Israel and speak Hebrew, he said to me, if this is your dream, then let's make your dream come true. And so we turned it into a positive by coming here because for me it was like a spiritual break. And I was like, the first half of the year was dealing with bureaucracy in Israel. And then I started, like, after the new year, I started looking for work. And I wanted to do something meaningful. I was looking into journalism, but I mean, as you know, journalism is very difficult to break into. So I wanted to do something with communications that was meaningful to me. And I ended up finding a job for a company called CyberWell. I'm now director of communications for CyberWell, and what they do is they use technology to find online anti-Semitism, and then they partner with social media platforms in order to make the internet a safer place for Jews and all people. So there's a lot of it, I'm sure a lot of people have had the experience of fighting with anti-Semites online. That's really like I've heard someone describe it as like a drip drip from the water hose. But if you can like remove anti-Semitic content at scale because the content violates policies that are put in place, you're really doing something to combat anti-Semitism because more than half of people under the age of like 35 get their news and information from social media networks, from online. They don't go to regular like traditional news media outlets, which is really interesting because I, I interviewed a friend of mine when I first started my YouTube channel that you guys might know in Philadelphia. She's just, a feature reporter that worked for CBS 3 that left there and kind of does her own thing on Instagram. And we were having this conversation. I was telling her I loved her work on CBS 3, but I see her more on Instagram than I ever saw her on TV. And she said, yeah, isn't that funny? Like, as far as viewership goes, you can get more of an audience online because of the nature of media is changing these days, which I find fascinating, which is also one of the reasons that I opened my YouTube channel because I wanted to try and practice editing and working with video because I usually worked with audio. And I've continued it here in Israel to tell stories, to interview people and to tell stories about kind of snippets of life in Israel. And it's kind of all over the place. It's not just, although some of it is war and living whatever normal life means in Israel, some of it is travel and seeing that Israel is a beautiful place that, a lot of people, families go on water hikes and, you know, there are amazing places to see. Some of it is interviews with people that I find interesting. Um, you'll also find if you go back far enough, you'll find, stuff that I was kind of practicing with like putting together stories of my experiences in Philadelphia with different events. I started like practicing with video, but I've really used it as an outlet to show what life is like because I think a lot of people don't know. Now, Jewish people know, but a lot of other people don't know. When you say Israel, they have a lot of ideas in their heads that are not true. Unfortunately, that also circles back to this idea that people get information from social media, and we're a very small population, a very small group compared to all the people that are trying to tell our story and define us and tell us who we are. Unfortunately, a lot of people hear that. I mean, I think it's a very common story that a lot of people have lost friends. I was very, very surprised when I lost a friend over email because I didn't agree that what's happening in Gaza is a genocide. And all I said was, it doesn't fit the definition of genocide. And I got back, other people disagree with you and good luck. And I told my husband, like, wow, that was just a 20-year friendship gone in an email. That was crazy. And I think a lot of people are experiencing that. I actually know that a lot of people are because I'm talking to people and interviewing people and talking to people that have moved to Israel and talking to people that are still in Philly that are also losing friends left and right. And it's the saddest thing. But it is empowering to know that we have each other. And what empowers me is doing important work. So working to, it- it's not just removing anti-Semitism, it's having the social media networks just basically follow through on their safety policies.
So that's a great segue to our next kind of question. And this is actually from a participant. Lily Friedland asked, how can you describe how pervasive the anti-Semitism on social media is and what particular strategies CyberWell uses to track and also the various strategies to combat the anti-Jewish hate online? So if you can get into some of the particulars of the
So
strategies.
we define anti-Semitism. There's a certain, it's not like anything is anti-Semitic. There is free speech and people can say horrible things that is not anti-Semitic. So we have a very narrow definition, which goes by the IRA definition of anti-Semitism, which is the widely used definition of anti-Semitism. we have a team of analysts that use like proprietary technology that they do searches using the technology and then by reviewing it themselves in multiple languages. And what we've noticed is that there are different events that will bring up different kind of waves of anti-Semitic reactions. So we saw specific things during the war in Iran. We saw specific things during Eurovision that were different. And then if we see content that violates the policies, then our research team drafts these alerts and connects directly with the platforms. I have to say most significant was after the murders of diplomats in DC. That was horrific. And we saw I can't really get into some of the specifics because that's confidential between CyberWell and the platforms. But what I can say about what CyberWell does is that, and this is really interesting, I think. Okay, so the platforms don't have a lot of incentive. I would say they need incentive okay, the platforms have the technology to find anti-Semitism and to like block it, eradicate, or whatever. And they do this very well with two items, two topics. One of the topics that they do is that they are able to identify using technology that they've created is pornography. They're able to, and child pornography, they find that and they, you know, dismantle it before it hits millions of views. And the other thing that they're really good at is copyright infringement. Okay. So when it comes to anti-Semitism, we know that they have the ability to do it. They just need the incentives. We are 0.02% of the global population. So CyberWell really kind of acts as we're a nonprofit organization, not connected to anything, not connected to the government or anything. And we help them to identify when they're violating their own policies. And then they make the decision whether or not certain items violate their policies, and then they may or may not take some items down. Sometimes they're better than others. Some platforms are better than others at that, and some topics are better than others. But we work in partnership with them. And so that we do this through technology. Technology has to be a part of the solution because you have to identify anti-Semitism before it gets millions of views. Because if you take something down, I mean, we saw this in news also. You make a mistake, right? Millions of people see it. You put a retraction or you say, "Oops, sorry, we made a mistake," but that doesn't matter. Millions of people have already seen it, and when you have it's like, death by 1,000 cuts. You have all of these mistakes and mistakes and mistakes and mistakes that changes people's perception and that adds to anti-Semitism, which, as we saw in DC, is deadly. It leads to people being murdered in the streets.
So this is very interesting, and I think that when you were talking before about about the universal experience of people that you're interviewing from the United States, everywhere in the world. I mean, I feel the same because I work with different people from Australia, New Zealand, Europe, Norway, and of course, all over the United States, North America. And we see this. People are disappointed. They're like, we can't believe it. We hear from people who we thought that are friends, and not even the direct social. We just hear it all everywhere. I mean, I for
It's
example,
everywhere.
it's everywhere. And for example, my family are from Israel, and we're meeting in Europe next month for 10 days of traveling, and I'm kind of booking the Airbnb on my account, and it just say I'm in the United States, but they recognize that my name is Israeli, and when I've been looking on Airbnb several times, I've been receiving messages like, "I'm sorry, we're not interested in negotiating or dealing with you, or renting you our house because we don't believe in the genocide that is happening and this and that." And it's like you're like, wow, this is a and we see it all everywhere, like you said. And we know that a lot of it is social media. But the question that I have is really, what's the I mean, social media are, of course, they're not going to remove this. We're going to remove pornography because they have to. But anything else, even though it's really horrible, they like it because all that the social media want, we know this, is to capture your time as a child, as a human, as an adult. It doesn't matter because the longer they have your attention is, especially if you hear echo chambers, if you're pro-Palestinian, you hear a lot more of that. And it's basically to capture your attention and your time, because that's how they sell advertising and how they make their money. So what is the percentage? Do you think that this is like the company that you're working with, or other companies that are doing similar things? Are they reaching really a critical mass, or is this hatred will continue, being spilled everywhere on social media, and we're just basically with these companies touching just like the tip of the iceberg?
Look, we're doing great work. We really are. We're removing a lot of anti-Semitic content. And it's not just attention, it's also money. So our CEO also talks a lot about how she has these really horrific thoughts about how much money did the platforms make on October 7th as people were mesmerized by these basically snuff live streams that were happening. But we are doing some really, really great work because we are removing content that gets millions of views. It's also a very young company, and we're going through a period of growth, and so there will be more growth. And as more technology is developed, it'll be able to like used for good. Technology needs to be used for good. Um, but also, I have to say that the platforms, for the most part, they are receptive. Like if they violate the policies, they remove content. Sometimes they don't agree that some items violate the policies, but when they see like it's clear, um, they're good about removing it. And we've worked very, very closely with the platforms, and we consider them to be our partners. We're not adversarial with them. We look at it as a partnership, and that's really, really important because that's how we do the best work, is to go through the back channels to talk with them. However, yes, there's a lot of anti-Semitism out there, and there's a lot of anti-Semitism. I think that not just in like not just talking about the platforms. I think that people come across anti-Semitism and they don't recognize it as anti-Semitism. And so even if you look at like the CyberWell Instagram account, that really does break down a lot of these tropes. It does break down a lot of these ideas. Like it explains, why the platforms need to take certain topics seriously. And I do recommend that people check it out. It's really interesting, and it's an educational kind of look at what is anti-Semitism and what we do. But yeah, on the Instagram page in particular, cyberwell.org. Cyberwell, yeah.
I shared it in
Um,
the chat also for those interested in reviewing it.
yeah.
So one of the things you talked about was incentivizing, adherence to policy. So I'm curious how it is incentivized specifically, if you can speak to that, what kind of strategy there is to do that, because in my experience, policies are great, but if they're not enforced, they're almost not there. So I'm curious really how
Exactly.
to live that out. And we'll start there and then see where it goes.
Well, that's why we have a research team, because it's really you look at it from a legal perspective. Like if you look at their policies, you say these are in violation of your policies, uh, please remove it. Like and also it has to do with relationships. We have good relationships with the trust and safety team, like personal relationships with the people. There are not a lot of people that work in these very, very specific departments. It's not like we're, you know, calling this, you know, this void, making up a phone call, calling a phone call to someone we don't know. These are people that the companies have, like the organization has made connections with and have a personal relationship with, and they come with the receipts. They come with the research team's reports, which are also on the website if you'd like to see. It's cyberwell.org. But they come to the reports, and they show them how this is detrimental, what's detrimental about it, what policies does it violate. And they, to their credit, they are receptive. Not always, but it's a start. Even if we're at like 50%, which I think in the beginning it was a quarter, now it's half, which that's great. Like we're getting better. And it's a small company and it only started in 2022, but with funding and with support from private donors, we are in this growth phase again. Um, Even if it was 1%, it would still, you can't get you 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 can't get discouraged, like every bit matters, every voice matters. And another thing, if I could pivot a little bit, I also think it's important for people to speak out online. If you have an account, like now is the time to say things, to talk about it, to have a conversation about it, to open up the dialogue, because people are listening. People are listening to your. I mean, I don't have a ton of followers, but people tell me all the time that they see what I write and they see what I say, and I mean, you tell me, Abby, you told me that you were listening. I think it's important. I think different perspectives are important for people. Even if you're even Jewish to Jewish, some people are Jewish and they're like, oh, that's a good point that I could make. I understand that now. Sometimes even as Jews in the diaspora don't understand why something might be so anti-Semitic.
Absolutely. And I think what's really fascinating is that, there's so many layers to what you're doing. It's storytelling, but you also have to have a captive audience. You have to get into that person's ear. And it's sort of like a bit of a harkening back to the fireside chats where people are sort of, people are craving that information. And so my sort of follow-up question to what you were saying is, okay, policy adherence, obviously important. That's sort of a, organization to organization, but the educational piece seems really, really crucial. And it seems like that's an area that still hasn't really been met in a we haven't been able to kind of get around that yet. And I'm curious if CyberWell is involved in sort of educational endeavors, or what your thoughts are on how we can
So
help kind of increase literacy around this.
CyberWell's goal is not education. It is to work directly with the platforms. So education is kind of a separate thing. It's not the top priority. There are lots of organizations that deal with education. Personally, though, I can talk personally about myself and my own platforms. I, when it comes to like what I put out there, I try not to like, okay, you have to think about who your audience is. So I'm not talking to the anti-Semites. The anti-Semites are not my platform. I guess Cyberwell, same thing. Like when we put stuff out on social, the anti-Semites are not our audience. I don't care if you listen. I don't care if you don't listen. But the people that I want to talk to are Jews and allies. That's my personal audience on my personal socials. And I'm talking to my people, my Jews and allies, that maybe they want more information. They want to know what it's like in Israel. They want to know what's a good argument when somebody says this to them. They know that it's anti-Semitic, but they don't understand why, maybe. Or what's life like here? Those are the things that they want to know. There are people that want to support us, and when we seek those people out, that's what we're going to get. If we're looking for first of all, we're never going to change the minds of the anti-Semites. Like that's up to them to get their own education, change or don't change, but we have to protect ourselves, protect our mental health, and look out for each other and educate people that want to learn from us, not people that want to fight with us. So, like, and I'm talking on a personal level, not like with work, because work is a different thing. And Cyberwell, their number one goal is not education, it is to build partnerships with the platforms in order to change policy from the inside. But I personally think that everybody has a responsibility. Like, Jews are under attack around the world. And if we can be visible, that's important. If we can chime into the conversation, pull up a chair, the conversation is happening on social media. We deserve a seat. There's not a lot of us also. So when you think about how many actual Jews there are in the world, how many of those people are tech illiterate, how many of those people are babies, and how many of those people actually have accounts, and then how many of those people, how many are actually willing to say something. It's not a lot of people compared to the rest of the world, including the rest of the world that hates us. So I do feel I unfortunately I see a lot of people getting hate for speaking out, but there it depends where we put our attention, I get some hate, but like I'm not talking to those people.
So this is really interesting. Going back to, and this is not anymore about your old job or your new job. This is just asking you a question based on your experience of being a news reporter and working within the mainstream media. So we see a question from Suzanne is that we see a lot BBC, NPR newscasts, and more that we really see so-called criticism, but it's really overt or subtle anti-Semitism. Um, from your profession experience, how do you feel, or when you hear these stories, either directly or indirectly from friends who listen to articles on TV, on the radio, etc.? How do you feel when you see people who are so off to represent only one side and almost toxic towards the Jews in Israel?
I think that's why and I used to talk about this all the time. I actually, before I moved to Israel, I did a talk to a Jewish Federation about this. I did several talks about this, the importance of being an educated news consumer. So I think it's our responsibility as news consumers to identify when there's bias, when there are lies, when something doesn't make sense. And I think it's our responsibility when we see things that don't make sense, we should call it out. Like, do not take just because it's mainstream media, take it for granted. I've seen that usually the stories where there are later redactions are the stories where you look at something and you're like, it doesn't really make sense. They're talking about the kids starving in Gaza, right? BBC or whomever, say, I don't know, whatever. I don't mean to call anybody out, but the adults surrounding them are well fed. How can that be? So there's inconsistencies. They're they say things like, and I've talked about this, that the Gaza, what's the name of the organization that is taken over? The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, right? That they are a controversial organization. What do you mean controversial? You can't just say they're controversial without explaining why. Who are you getting this information from? Who is telling you that they're controversial when they have apparently distributed millions of meals successfully? Like, you know, you have to, I guess, like be an educated consumer. Also, when you look things up online, a lot of us are like looking up information. All right, let me Google it real quick. Well, where's that information coming from? Is there a byline? Is there a human being attached to the story, or is it someone's blog that looks like a news site or something? Have you ever heard of it before? Google the news site. Google the name of the person. But then again, you can't always Google things because there are a lot of problems, for example, with Wikipedia. We all know what's happening there, that's been infiltrated by people that want to put a bias in there. But like you have to use your critical thinking skills, like now more than ever, to um to look at the news and to look at the information you're getting. We're in this like really crazy era, which has been, I guess, happening for several years now, where it's not easy to discern what's real and what's fake. And that's dangerous, but that's also on us. It's our responsibility to be educated consumers, to be critical thinkers, to, if something doesn't make sense, if there's a red flag about something you're seeing, and also ask why. Even when you see it in the news, why? Why are they describing something this way? Where did they get this information from? Is this information attributed to somebody or some organization? What do we know about that organization? You can also look into things and look them up, and how long have they been in existence, and where do they get their funding? There's a lot of questions that we can ask to be better news consumers. One of the things I really like to do when you're looking up items online is, if you see a photo, um, probably the young people in this chat are familiar with this, but you can save that photo and put it into a Google search, and it'll pull up every time this photo has been shown online. So you can find a photo like, is this really Gaza or is it Syria? Is it really a real photo or has this been used somewhere else, the same photo? Sometimes, yes, legitimately, there is like a pool organization that takes a photo, and a lot of different news organizations get the same photo. But what should really raise a red flag is if you see a photo, but then it comes up in different dates, different years, different times. Unless they're referencing back to an incident, I've use your common sense, like, but that's a good way to check something. It's funny because, and I digress. I did a talk at Jewish Federation, in Lancaster, I believe it was, and one of the participants said to me, "That's also really good for internet dating. So if you want to know where you found that photo, put it through a Google search, and you'll see all the places where it showed up. If you think you're being catfished, which is a separate thing, but kind of related because it has to do with misinformation and disinformation."
I think you're making a lot of really important points. And the scary thing is that this is just like the reality now. Like when we look at people, how people consume news, it's not only on, yes, a lot of it is on social media. And we know that social media, if they will kind of adapt you like we talked about before, and you will hear people who are biased to be like your side. It's very difficult to get the objective news. Also, when I was younger, growing up in Israel, we had one news channel, and it was pretty much in the middle. And now, as we are, the New York Times on one side and Fox on this side, and it depends on where you're looking for your news resources, you're probably going to get some biased opinions, and it's becoming more and more difficult. I can only share, I'm a cardiologist by training, and we have a journal that I like. It's called Cardiovascular Business, and it's like it talks about business and startups and things of that sort. So the general editor, or the major person behind the newspaper, basically came up and said, talked about a cardiologist that was killed in Gaza just last week. And in that, article that he wrote, he basically created, these are the facts. The facts are that the IDF are systemically after the physicians and the healthcare providers in Gaza as part of their attempt to cause more damage to the Gazan population and do this and do that. And he's quoting all these like vague news from Palestinian Authority, from this and that. But again, you see this, and you may say to us, yeah, you have to look at this and you read this, but the vast majority, 99.9% of the people will not. They don't have the patience to spend the anything to go and start saying, is this right? Is this wrong? Let me look at this picture. Let me look at this picture. They see it and they hear most of the news, especially if it aligns their thought process as this is the gospel, or the Aseret Dibrot, the Ten Commandments from Sinai. And I'm just saying, I don't have any answers, but it's real scary. And with that, I just want to, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say that, okay, so journalistically speaking, if somebody is talking about making accusations against another organization, if you're saying like whatever the accusation is being made against the IDF, they need to have an opportunity to respond. So they have, at least they have to say they reached out to them. I don't know if organizations are doing that. If you're a journalist and I interview somebody that says that the IDF is systemically going after whomever, I need to go and I need to reach out to the IDF and I need to interview a spokesperson or interview a commander or somebody that can talk to me uh, to refute this. You can't just, it's not responsible to just put this stuff out there without at least giving the other side a chance to respond. So now, of course, people show their biases in many ways, how many quotes and here and how many quotes here, but ideally you want to be right down the middle. If you can ask the same question to each side of a conflict, even better. This one says this one says this responded with this responded with that. Great. You should not show your bias. But sometimes people show their bias by heavily quoting one side and then not quoting another side. There was one time when I was covering the Palestine Rights Festival, and I remember I was not getting a response from the organizers of Palestine Rights, and I said to the managers, I know there's a lot of scrutiny on this. I'm not even reaching out to Jewish organizations because I don't want there to be even a thought of bias. I'm just going by this is the correspondence here, this is the response, this is the correspondence, this is the response. That's it. My opinion, my background should not have anything to do with it. It's not connected at all. Now, when you say that people do not have the time to think about these things, unfortunately, that is how democracies die. I mean, democracy is built on information, and you have to have the information to make the right choices. And if you're making your choices and you're voting based on wrong information, then that's how democracies can be manipulated to become something else. And so you might not have time, but again, I'm going back to it's our responsibility to be smart news consumers, just like it's our responsibility not just to vote, but to be educated voters. So I know it's hard to hear because there was a time when it was much easier. We didn't have so much misinformation and disinformation. We could really trust that news organizations were very even-handed. They would go here, they would go here. They had journalistic integrity, and it wasn't so much based on money and attention that we've talked about before. And so the responsibility more than ever is on us. It's just the way it is. I know it sucks to hear like, but it's time consuming. But, you know, but like I just don't want to like I don't want to. I have other things to do. Uh, Yes, the world has changed, and more of that responsibility is on us as opposed to on the media organizations, especially since people putting out information are not journalists on social media. They're not journalists. And even journalists, if they're on social media, if they're not working for a company, maybe they don't feel like they need to be impartial, now that they're not beholden to a media company. So even like you have to always be using your common sense and your critical thinking skills because if you like a democracy and you want to keep it that way, we have a
Excellent.
responsibility.
So I have a question that is informed by some of the other participants as well. So you keep talking about disinformation, misinformation, and how we as consumers should be informed and be responsible. And I agree. So I'm curious if you can speak to what CyberWell is doing with AI, kind of determining whether or not something has been generated by AI or by a person, if they're able to determine percentage of the article or of the piece that is AI generated versus, person generated. And as a follow-up, if you can speak to, there are other organizations that are working, or other influencers, I guess is really the word, who are working to combat anti-Semitism via social media. And they have different angles and avenues, whether it's through art, whether it's through comedy, whatever it is. I'm curious if you personally or through CyberWell, if that's something you guys are kind of in touch with, how effective are they? What's your take on that? And they're kind of connected where these are people who are trying to kind of write the story, correct the story, but how do we do it right? How do we do it, responsibly? And how do we ensure that things are not, we're not perpetuating misinformation unintentionally even? I don't know.
Well, I don't have the exact numbers on AI, but I can tell you that AI is the next kind of frontier. Um, there was recently a anti-Semitic song by a known anti-Semite that he put out a song called Boom Boom Tel Aviv. I probably shouldn't say it because I don't like to give a lot of. Anyway, he used an AI program to create this anti-Semitic song that went viral, got millions and millions and millions of views before it hit its peak, and was eventually removed. But and there's also pictures, anti-Semitic pictures that people can generate. There's also, I'm sure you've heard about the issues with Grok that was spewing anti-Semitism and like because what happens is the AI takes the information and kind of creates new information by what you feed it. It's kind of like an algorithm. You get what you put into it. And so it is the responsibility of the organization, the outlet, whatever, to keep that in check. So that is a problem that CyberWell is keeping its eye on. Um, and we have to be aware of that. I'm sure people are starting to notice that there are, thumbnails on YouTube that you can tell are AI generated, or there's music that's AI generated. I don't know if you can tell if it's real or not, but there are programs that spit out a lot of anti-Semitism. I wish I could tell you something good about it. It's just important to be aware of it. And if you're aware of something, then perhaps you can build the technology to fight it, to combat it. You will always need like human people to look at it. That's why there's, people in that there are a few people that are in these departments, safety, and they have to look at what you send them. And I know that people do look at that, at what we send them. Um, yeah, as far as what to do about it, be aware of it and report it. If you see anti-Semitism or you see AI anti-Semitism, report it. And also, if you see a video that's shocking or crazy and you don't know the source of it and you didn't take it yourself, please don't share it. That's another thing. It's just a journalistic basic thing. Like if you didn't take the video or you don't know the person that took the video and you're not sure where it came from or its origin, it might be AI, it might be completely taken out of context. We have to be responsible ourselves as well. Wait, what was the rest of your question? You asked me about AI.
Meandered. And the question was, there are other influencers who are trying to do this work, and I'm curious, who are trying to combat anti-Semitism through, sort of social media presence, not necessarily through news. Um, and I'm curious if what your take is, or if that's something CyberWell also kind of looks at. Are they effective? How do you determine if they're effective? Is it just sort of more, you know, efforts in the cyber world of trying to correct the narrative, or how do you determine if it's working?
Well, that's not in the scope of what CyberWorld looks at. We're not an influencer organization, completely separate. Um, but I have to say, I personally make a mental kind of note when people speak out and when they don't. I notice. I'm sure you notice. I mean, just like I notice former colleagues who don't speak out, who only talk about sports, that like I'm like, really? That's the most important thing that's going on in your life right now? I mean, I appreciate it because I think it's another voice to add to the conversation. I mean, just think about all the people or all of the voices or all of the things that are said that are false and how that is able to change people's impression of us or change people's impression of Jews in Israel. And then that has real world consequences of what people think about us and what they want to do to us. It's dehumanizing. It takes away empathy. And that's what leads to people feeling like it's free reign, free season on Jews. So when you have anytime you're able to change the algorithm or add to the conversation with facts or with positive information or with a counterpoint, that's important, no matter how small, no matter how drip drip. I mean, I personally notice it. This is not something that is like I said, it's not a cyberwell thing, but I see it. I spend a lot of time on social media and I notice when people talk, when people are eloquent about a certain topic, when they make smart points. I notice, I follow them. I want to support them. I think their voices are valid and important. And it's also very important to know that even though that there are like billions of social media users, everything gets tailored to you. So your voice is really important because like maybe the people that would connect with you are maybe there are people that are in your age range or demographic or somewhere you are in the world, or maybe the way you speak, maybe it's your mannerisms, maybe it's a joke you made that you can connect with people, even if it's a few people. Like there's this crazy system. It's like it's a completely different media landscape where it's not just a one-way conversation like mainstream media. Like people share your stories and they can share your ideas and it can get a lot of reach. And so it is important to speak out. But you each person is individually talking to their you find your audience online. I always feel like on YouTube, like I have a YouTube channel, and sometimes I talk about like it takes time for videos to quote unquote, they call it, to find their audience. So who are the people that are connecting with your work that's coming out there? And it takes people time, but they will find their audience that are consistent. And then you are also building a community, and you have people that are getting it. I can't tell you how many times I've had people send me messages saying like, "Oh, you made a really interesting point. Like I never thought about it that way," or that's really important what you said here. Like I get a lot of messages like that, and it's important. Like if I wasn't saying it, then they wouldn't have heard it.
All good points. There was a question, and just to frame the conversation, all of our webinars were 60 to 75 minutes with a hard stop. So in 10 minutes, we're going to be done. But there's a lot of questions from the attendees, and we'll just try to get a few of them, a few more. So one of them is talking about, and this is not in your CyberWell just hat, it's just specifically with your experience on social media. So Suzanne is asking, unless X or Twitter is affected, you won't stem the flow. And people know that, and you actually mentioned the Grok and the whole Hitler thing and praise Hitler and all this in the last few days. And she's saying it's more than just social media. X, can you comment on this, and how do we measure success in terms of content removal, etc.? Specifically with this media that is kind of out of control.
How do we measure? Well, we have to get them to enforce their policies at scale. You have to identify what is, yeah, and she's right. Some platforms do better than others. Um, TikTok has been really receptive to us, surprisingly. Like they have had their issues, but they've been really receptive. And X has been less so, but still, we're still partners with them, and they still do remove what they when they find that something is anti-Semitic. Now, I don't have the metrics in front of me to share with you, but yeah, I mean, they have a responsibility to. It just like any business has a responsibility to keep their users safe, right? This is a business. They made a promise to us as users that everybody will be safe on the platform, and they have to follow through on that. And so CyberWell kind of really works as kind of the legal side. That's why we have these teams of researchers to make our case, to have them follow through on their policies. Um, I'm not really, I don't have, like I said, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I do know that we have had success. Even if it's, we have had actually we have had success. We've gotten some really big anti-Semitic accounts removed, and rightly so. We're not about censorship. We're about keeping the internet safe for Jewish people and in turn, everybody. If we're talking about the internet, I do also want to say that um, it is important to, okay, this is from me personally. I know that we put a lot of emphasis on like the negative and the anti-Semites out there. I think it's equally as important to emphasize the people that are doing positive work online, and to share that information, and to share those accounts. Um, Also, if you want to talk about like, I wouldn't respond to the anti-Semitic accounts. This is kind of like a sidebar here. It's really easy to fight with them and to get into it. Instead, make your own post and talk about whatever you want to talk about, but don't respond to an anti-Semite's post because you're only boosting their algorithm. And if you see accounts that you care about, that you like, that you want to amplify, then share them with your friends. My account is called Hadas on Air. And I do encourage people to look at it. I work really, really hard to interview some people and to show Israel, and to show what's happening here. And I think it's important there's a lot of small accounts, not just Hadas on Air, but a lot of accounts that have a lot of great things to say that are not hateful, that deserve amplification. It just kind of takes time to find the audience. I would encourage people to find the positive, find the accounts that they like, and focus on those.
I think we're going to take one more question, and there's a question going back to media, to mainland stream media. So there's a question from a DC journalist, and she's asking what your recommendation is when we see political elite voices that or gesture anti-Semitism, like Vance endorsing the right party in Germany or Musk's Nazi salute, etc. Do you have any advice? And I guess she's sharing from her experience how to cover this here when people are seeing all the visuals of Gaza that are so magnetizing.
Wait, what's the question?
The question is, how do you, like, from a perspective of a journalist, do you have any advice in terms of how to cover this when so many people are just like, oh, did you see this video of what is happening now in Gaza, etc., to kind of keep the conversation more balanced?
Okay, two things to say about this. So obviously you want to show both sides of the story. Sometimes though, sometimes you don't have to jump in on every conversation. I don't think you need to jump in on every conversation. Um, some things will blow over. I mean, some things are not, some things are news and some things are not news. Some things are news and some things are more like gossipy. And are there multiple sides to the story? Are you being responsible in getting both of those sides? Is how many people are affected by this story? Um, like what will happen if you wait on the story and collect more information? What will do you need, is it a breaking news situation where you need to say something right now? These are all kind of considerations that I take when I think about whether or not to cover a story and whether or not to do it now or later. Um, I'm trying to think of like, can she give me more? I don't know if she's writing in the chat, more of an example of what she would like to know or more detail of like what she's asking.
If she has, I'll connect her to you. But yeah, I think that there's so much to talk about in terms of media and social media, and it's great that you're doing all that you're doing. Abby, any last comments from you or questions?
Well, I first just want to say thank you because this has been very informative and interesting, and I think you made a really good point about, specifically checking things and thinking about where things come from and really using that muscle that we all have and learned about how to critically think about something and not just sort of follow what has been sent. So I think that's a really good kind of advice to leave on. And I think there are always more questions, but I think for now we'll pause it here and just say thank you.
Can I just say something? I think that if you really want to make a difference, you're not going to make a difference with strangers online. The people that you're going to make a difference is are your friends that are still your friends, those that actually want to have a conversation. There are a lot of people that don't want to have a conversation. I personally was on the University of Pennsylvania campus in October, November 2023 with kids holding up signs saying, I'm Jewish, let's have a conversation. People didn't want to have a conversation. The people that do want to have a conversation with you, those are the people that you should invest your time in. The people that are asking questions privately, that are DMing you, that are asking you, hey, how are you? I want to know, what it's like. There are people out there. Of course, there are the people that have kind of dropped off and have not responded that you've noticed that have stopped liking your posts and all of that. We're not talking to those people, all right? I do want to end, like, if we're going to end the conversation, I do want to say that, like, yes, there are a lot of haters out there, but we do not need to focus on them. That's not going to help anyone. They've already made up their minds. They're already, kind of turned. Do not put your energy into people that don't care. Put your energy into the allies, into other Jews, into friends. Those are the people that you want to have actual conversations with because you want your conversation to, if you're going to put energy into something, you want it to be worth your while, right? So if somebody starts writing you something, take it to DM. Take it to, if you can take it to a phone conversation, even better. If you can take it to a face-to-face conversation, that's the best way. But also if you're going to fight with somebody, make sure you're not fighting with a stranger, because that stranger could also be a bot. And then you're just spinning your wheels for what? For nothing, you know? Um, and also, like, it's just really important that you're not wasting your energy, especially if you're taking it online. Yes, a lot of people will see your conversations, and sometimes I will consider that and then stop the conversation, because you don't want to go back and forth making the same points with somebody that might not even be real or care or has already made up their mind. So it's important for us to like focus on our mental health, put your energy where it counts. And there are a lot of people that do want to understand. And we just have to shift our focus, and we will find those people. There are people that want to know how we're doing, how we're coping, and I'm sure all of us have had people that have been like, I don't really understand the Middle East. Can you like explain it to me? And have we all had those people that have come up to us? Those are the people that are going to say, wow, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. But certainly, it's not your responsibility to educate people that don't want to be educated. We learn this from other movements, other people that have said, like, educate yourself. But if people really want to know something, then they're not going to come at you so combative. We look at some of these movements on campuses, and we see that there is absolutely no interest in finding common ground. That's that's a waste of time. Do you know what I'm talking about? If people don't want to invest in, conversation is talking and listening. And listening is a big part of the conversation. People who don't want to listen aren't going to make good conversation partners, and they're not going to be able to, nothing will come of that. So use your energy wisely, because it's very easy to get burned out when there's so much noise around us. And I want to leave people like on the positive note that there are people that care. There are lawmakers that care. There are organizations that care. There are groups that are working to make things better. And this is also why CyberWell works, is because we don't put statements out and, complaining and screaming. Like, we go directly to the partners. We go directly to our partners and have one-on-one conversations and talk about how can we help, what can we do. I think this is the same attitude we should take with on a personal level. Go to your friends, like pick up the phone and call them and have a conversation. If you don't have their phone number, maybe you shouldn't invest in that person, typing on the computer. Like, maybe you don't know them well enough if you don't have a phone number to reach out to them. And if you do, then you should be having those conversations. Those are the people that are worth it. Those are the people that are gonna be receptive to what we have to say, not bots, not strangers, not, although it's so enticing, right? Someone says something horrible and then like free Palestine or whatever. And you get so mad, and that's what they're counting on, for you to get mad, stay on social media, write a thesis that is not going to change anybody's mind, you know, like you want to hit your audiences so that it counts.
Yeah, listen, these are very, very good points, especially nowadays. I mean, 15, 20 years ago, we didn't have social media and we just talked to each other, and it's very difficult. Any person who's trying to fight the war of social media, it's very frustrating and very time and mostly energy consuming. So, well, listen, with that, we wanted to really thank you, Hadas. Also, thank you, Abby, for the fascinating insights. And we will be in touch. Again, people can follow you on your YouTube channel. And we'll also read
Hadas
about
on air.
CyberWell and other companies. So, toda rabah, and be safe, everybody.
Please, the YouTube channel is Hadas on air, all one word. The Instagram channel is also Hadas on air. If you stayed here for the whole conversation, it means you were interested in it. So please, you can continue the conversation with me. What I really like about Instagram, YouTube is where I want you to like see all the videos, but on Instagram there's chat capabilities. So feel free to DM me there. People can reach out, ask questions, continue the conversation on Instagram, on Hadas on air, and I'm happy to chat with folks. I've found like a lot of people with really interesting perspectives and from that way. And thank you everybody for tuning in. I'm so flattered that so many people tuned in to hear what I have to say. Thank you, Philly, and apparently the rest of the world, the rest of the country. There's people from all over the place, not just Philly. So I'm flattered and thank you.
Thank you. Toda rabba, and enjoy the rest of the weekend, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.